What's up, Internet? Welcome to Once Over. I'm Kaylee, and this is...
I'm Mike, the football grump.
And today we're going to be giving the Once Over to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Hey, Dom! Looks like this one's suffering from shell shock. Boy, I guess we can really shell it out. It was a shell of a good hit. I like it. Step up.
There will be spoilers. Will you just tell us a little bit about who you are and where everybody can find you?
I'm the football grump. I run a New York Giants related football podcast on YouTube where I can be found at Just Giants Podcast.
Yeah, and we're going to link it down below also, so everybody definitely go and check Mike out. Awesome sports commentary and sometimes some other fun stuff too.
Sometimes during the summer, yeah.
When we were thinking about reviewing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we could not think of anything better to do than to make pizza.
Pizza dude's got 30 seconds.
So today you are going to get to watch us make pizza while we talk a little bit about our history with this movie, and then we will get into the review. We're making pizza! Ooh, turtles!
Alright, so first things first, we're going to flour up a little bit. We've got our dough already made and ready to go. Spread a little on our countertop here.
Alright, so tell me a little bit about why you love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles so much.
This movie came out in 1990, so I was 3 years old when this came out, so I've had this movie my entire life. And for a long portion of my childhood, I would come home from kindergarten, then through like first, second grade, and watch this movie on VHS with a grilled cheese. And so I know this movie inside and out.
You didn't have pizza?
No, my mom made it for me. My mom wasn't gonna make me pizza.
That's
She was gonna make me a grilled cheese.
I love that. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Should we eat some pizza that we just made? Cowabunga! Yep, both of us just did that immediately. Cool. So for my pizza, I'm going to be making a garbage plate pizza. A garbage plate is a Rochester tradition, and Mike the football grump got to have his first one today, so we figured use some leftovers to make a delicious pizza. A garbage plate is traditionally going to be 2 cheeseburgers on top of a bed of French fries and macaroni salad. And that all gets topped with mustard, onions, and also a thing called meat hot sauce, which is kind of like a thinner chili. It has a little bit of like cinnamon sorts of flavors in it. It's really delicious. And that all gets mixed up together, and it's disgusting and wonderful and the perfect hangover food. So I love this movie, but my strongest memories regarding Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was actually for the third one, which is obviously a far worse movie than this. But I went on like the best date of my life to go see that movie. I was like 5 years old, went to the movie theater. His mom sat behind us so that we felt like we were on a real date. Oh God, why is it so scary? And then after we were done watching the movie, it was like super awesome. And he was like, I'm gonna show you my sick karate moves. So we went back to his place, he put on his little karate outfit, and then he showed me all his sick karate moves, and then he poked a dead bird with a stick, and...
You were the most impressed you've ever been.
I don't think I will ever have a better date ever than that one. That was the height of my dating career. It's all been downhill.
All been downhill since then. And it starts and ends with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Of course, yeah, wonderfully.
I'm gonna rapid fire him, okay?
I'm horrible at it.
They're so aerodynamic.
Ah! I hadn't actually watched the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in a really long time, and I was so happy that you suggested that we review this movie because holy crap, I had forgotten how amazing it was.
Motherfuck.
So one of my favorite things about this movie in particular is that of all the Ninja Turtles movies, and I haven't seen all of them, this one to me stands out the most as being the least cartoony.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So it has a special connection to me.
It's an extremely mature movie, so it's almost an adult movie with kids' characters, which I think is so super cool. And I think that a lot of that happened because the movie was independently made. So it was made by people who really had a passion for it. They just wanted to make this amazing movie, and that's what they ended up doing. I did it! I made a fucking pizza! I did it! Alright,
ready?
Turtle power.
Turtle power.
Do you like penicillin on your pizza?
I'm gonna buy a hamburger.
Holy shit, that's actually...
That's pretty good.
I'm not a big fan of the French fries, I'm gonna be honest.
It's a little potatoey. But it's not bad. Mustard's interesting.
There's a lot of interesting things going on with this one.
I don't hate it.
I think we would have been better off with penicillin. And it was based mostly on the comics. So at the time that this movie came out, the cartoon I think already had existed. But I think that they drew mostly from the comic books, which neither you nor I have read.
Right. I was never a big comic book collector, so I've never read or seen them. But I know that they've gone through several iterations, starting with the darkest that the Ninja Turtles are, is like the original comic. And then from there, it kind of gets slowly more cartoony over time.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the plot. So this movie opens up with April O'Neil, the news reporter, getting mugged, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles rescuing her.
This is 1990, so this is like 80s Manhattan,
Yep.
where crime is rampant and there's a new crime wave about. Teenagers are stealing things in what looks like the most fun way to steal things. And over top, we hear April O'Neil doing the report on it before she gets mugged and immediately rescued by shadowed heroes.
That's a really cool aspect of this movie, is that we get a very slow reveal of the turtles themselves. We kind of see like little snippets of them, we don't really get anything, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're hit with that opening title, as opposed to actually seeing the turtles themselves. And boy, is that reveal worthwhile, because we get amazing costume design in this movie.
That's one of the things that I like the most about it, is that the set design, the lights, everything, none of this feels cartoony because it's not a cartoon, it's not CGI, it's people in costume.
Excellent!
And sometimes that doesn't exactly work out. Actually, there's one scene where you can kind of see one of the dudes inside the costume when he opens up his mouth. But I think that it makes everything feel really human, and I think that it gives the film this extremely human, like, you know, we're connected immediately to these characters that are mutant mongoloid turtles.
Also, the fact that there's pretty much no CGI in it means that everything's very practical, so it has a sense of realism to it. Them rescuing April was their first actual adventure into the real world and using the techniques that they learned. So they're really excited when they come back to the sewer and meet with their mentor, their father figure, Master Splinter, personified probably in his scariest form of all iterations is in this movie.
I remember being terrified of him when I was a kid, even though he was supposed to be like the best of the good guys.
There's a particular scene where he places his very odd and scary looking hand on Raphael's head in like slow motion, and I remember being kind of creeped out by that.
For sure. The movie never is slow paced. We pretty much are getting fight scene after fight scene. Each fight scene builds off of the previous one, and we get to see the conflict between the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who obviously represent good, and the Foot Clan, who is
headed by the Shredder. Yeah. I think that the coolest thing about that too is that all those little fights, they are all small skirmishes and isolated incidents until there's one big point in the middle of the movie that there's a huge fight, and then there's kind of just small fights again until the very end, the climax of the movie.
That choreography also during those fight scenes, absolutely outstanding.
Every step is clearly detailed, as this is still like somewhat of a comedy. The script is based around what's happening in the choreography as well.
I mean, come on. How do you guys expect to beat me? Good answer. Good answer.
Which is super cool. The way that they actually filmed a lot of the choreography for this movie was they actually slowed down the frame rate by just a couple of frames. And the reason that they had to do that is because the suits were actually super clunky.
Right.
So it looked weird. And so they slowed down the frame rate a little bit and then sped it back up, and I think that that gave a really effective end result.
I didn't even know that, so you can't even really tell at all. It looks just totally normal.
Another thing that I thought was an interesting choice, which I suspect was a budget choice, in the comic books, all of the Foot Clan, so all of Shredder's kind of minions, they are robots, or like, I don't know, some sort of cyborg or something like that. And something that I thought was really challenging for this movie, because this is a violent movie, this is a scary movie, especially for kids, is that now we have the Foot Clan is humans. So we have kids being the Foot Clan.
That's sort of the dark, not spoken about part of this, as they're in masks, but the Foot Clan in this movie is wayward teenagers that Shredder recruits for his thieving empire, where he's just going to steal as much as he wants. And after they've become part of this group that just pretty much has a playhouse in a warehouse on a fictional island.
Dude, I would have killed for that playhouse, by the way. I would have absolutely joined the Foot Clan.
100%.
Yeah. There is skateboard ramps, cigarettes, all the cigarettes you could possibly want.
Regular or mental?
Billiards, poker, cigars,
gambling,
bass playing,
all the video game.
all the arcade machines are there too.
Dude,
So cool.
I'm in.
And then all those
up.
kids are walking home with their own stereos at the end of the
I
night,
know,
too.
right? Yeah.
But then, as a side thing, as they become part of this organization, they train on the side in martial arts under Shredder's companion, I guess also underling, Master Tatsu. And then they earn the Dragon Dochi, which is his insignia on his headband, and they become full members of the Foot Clan, where they're the foot soldiers, really. So yeah, it is truly violent because, I don't know, swords and stuff.
It's violent. People are dying. We know that there's going to be deaths. We know that there's going to be crazy things that are happening in this film. And again, that kind of leads into the, is it a kid's movie or is it an adult's movie? And I think that you have some really interesting points about that. So we get kind of like the evil side is a very adult sort of evil side. But in addition to that, we get a really interesting aspect of the good side, which is that we get a lot of emotions within the turtles and their relationships.
It's really important that this is a teenager's movie, a young adult's movie entering adulthood. And it's done exceptionally well because everybody is kind of a teenager. The Foot Clan are teenagers, the Ninja Turtles are teenagers, and so you have this dynamic where people are trying to find their way in the world and navigate good and evil and right and wrong at, I guess, the time in your life where you're going to make those big decisions on who you are. That leads right into the more adult theme of this movie, is that it has a theme. This isn't just good versus evil at all.
Yeah.
This is really, to me, has always felt like a story about family and specifically fathers and sons. That seems to be the highlight of this movie. This breaks down into 4 specific groups that are father and son dynamics, or pseudo-father and son dynamics. And the first is Splinter and his former master, Hamato Yoshi. And this is kind of a stretch a little bit. This is kind of a small snippet into that. Splinter's owner as a pet when he is a young rat in a cage in Japan was a man named Hamato Yoshi, who was apparently a very good person. And he had a dynamic where Hamato Yoshi is practicing his martial arts and Splinter is mimicking the movements from the cage. And that's sort of where we see the passing down of the knowledge from father to son, even if it's unintentional through this kind of wonky human to animal situation. But then that ends up being trickled down then as Splinter discovers the turtles walking around in ooze, and he gathers into a coffee can, and they all grow into these humanoid versions of,
The mutant Ninja Turtles, I have heard. I love that we get a quick origin story in this film.
The origin story is not presented to us as in, here's the backstory.
Yeah.
We get it in drips and drabs as is explained to different characters. Originally, we find out the good version, the happy version of Splinter discovering the turtles when he's talking to April O'Neil. Later on, as Splinter is talking to, I think it's Danny?
Yeah, I think so too.
He goes into how and when he wound up in New York City, which is a separate part of that backstory that's not nearly as nice. And that goes into our next little father-son dynamic, which is the Shredder and his Foot Clan. There's a really, really powerful scene where he speaks for the first time that stuck with me forever. And a really well-shot scene with the long silhouette of him coming out and the music.
That is terrifying. It is ominous. It is spooky. It is perfectly shot. I think that Shadow is, like, one of the best parts of this film.
And just the music, too, with the percussions, almost like Terminator.
Yes.
We get a really powerful speech from Shredder to the audience of teens, some of which are full Foot Clan soldiers, and most of which are just wayward teens that are part of this collective. And it opens up with him rewarding someone who has achieved full membership of the Foot Clan, and he's putting the Dragon Dochi on his head.
You are here because the outside world rejects you. This is your family. I am your father.
What we have here is I like to think of it as like being coaxed into a van with candy sort of situation. You have vulnerable people that are being gathered up by a selfish person under the guise of family and loyalty. That's really just disingenuous.
Yeah.
And that's sort of another father-son dynamic throughout this movie. The next one, and probably the biggest one, is obviously Splinter and the Turtles. And this is the main focus of the movie because they're our main characters. But in my opinion, this movie is a movie about Raphael specifically because he's the one who seems to struggle the most personality-wise, dealing with the family dynamic and being more of a group rather than a solo figure.
Another big theme in this movie is definitely identity.
Yes.
And so I think that Raphael's struggle with identity is really, really focused on throughout this film. We get to see him doing things like going to a movie theater and disguising himself as a person, which obviously is blatantly obvious that he's a fucking fucking Ninja Turtle. Like, there's absolutely no question in anybody's mind that this is a Mongoloid. Like,
so right from the get-go, we have Raphael as the only one who makes a mistake. He leaves behind his weapon in saving April, and he doesn't forgive himself, even though right away, when he admits it to Master Splinter, he simply says, "Then it is gone. Forget about it." He can't forgive himself. So he leaves, while they're celebrating their first victory, he leaves to go see a movie. And we see oftentimes that Raphael leaves the group to blow off steam or deal with things in his own way. And that seems to be the biggest crux of the movie, is Raphael finding his own way back to family. We see also that Raphael at one point saves April on his own. Later on in the movie, she gets jumped in a subway and he's already tracing her. So he's able to save her, and it's again his mistake. By doing this by himself, he doesn't realize that he's followed back home when he brings April to the sewer hideout. So ultimately what we see when they return home from April's and that Splinter's been kidnapped and the place has been ransacked, we see each of the reactions individually. Leonardo's the first one to enter in and is immediately looking for danger. We see, I think it's Michelangelo, falls to his knees. Raphael shoves his way through last, and he has the loudest outburst of the four. Again, kind of showing that he blames himself the most.
totally. He's got a couple of those good outbursts throughout the movie, too. He's got the damn.
That's right.
He's got multiple dams, and then he has that howl scream.
That's a pretty powerful scream. Like, I'm not sure who the actor is who did the voice for Raphael.
No, I don't know.
What the heck was that?
Looked like sort of a big turtle in a trench coat.
But all the voices of all these turtles were really, really well done, and I have to imagine it's a really difficult thing to match up, not animatronics, but like an actor, puppeteer.
Well, and again, I mean, think about, in addition to that, you're also filming in a different frame rate, so like, even more challenging, and I think it's so perfect, it's so human, and that's why we feel so connected with these turtles that are not anything
human, really.
Yeah, we shouldn't care about them, but we do.
I think there's some other really interesting things. As Raphael is at one point ambushed all on his own, he's left unconscious for a middle section of this movie. I would say like the Act 3 kind of portion of this movie. And in that way, this is where he starts to be brought back into family, as Leonardo stays by his side throughout being unconscious, and they escape to like upstate New York or something. I'm not really sure where.
I know, Rochester maybe. They had garbage plate pizza too. Gross.
I think another interesting thing is Raphael struggles with focusing and unclouding his mind from anger, and what we see when they're separated from Splinter in the farmhouse, even if it's just for a brief second, we see Raphael literally standing on the roof of the building screaming out to Splinter. And on the flip side, we see Leonardo is the one who on his own meditates and is actually able to communicate with Splinter.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the moment where Leonardo groups the turtles together, the brothers, where they have a group meditation. They're able to, their eyes are closed so they can't see him, but as the viewer we see the Splinter appear in the campfire. He has a message for them. And I think that's where the turning point is for Raphael as a character. When they first return from their victory in saving April for the first time, Splinter rewards them and tells them that there is still knowledge to obtain. This one victory is only their first, but that it's important for them to maintain focus and understand things, because one day he won't be there for them. And we see that message trickle down to them in different ways, whereas Michelangelo sort of brushes it off. Most of them sort of brush it off, but it's Donatello that reflects on it the most right away.
Yeah, and Donatello even asks Mikey about it, but Mikey's just kind of like, the pizza's not here.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice night.
Pizza dude's got 30 seconds.
Hey, Mikey, did you ever think about what Splinter said tonight? I mean, about what it would be like. You know, not having him.
Time's up. $3 off.
Which I think is kind of a cute little scene, because again, it gives each one of the turtles their own individual character. And that's something that I, as a kid, really struggled to identify which turtle was which, because, you know, my brain just wasn't developed enough to be able to figure out what exactly was going on. But watching movies like this back as an adult, each one of the turtles is almost a different aspect of a person, you know, and we have each one of our fears and each one of our struggles, and they kind of represent that one being overall, and I think that that's really, really well done in this movie.
They do a good job with that. And also, part of the reason that Splinter connection with Raphael is so present, I guess one of the reasons why I really like this movie is I felt that personal connection with Raphael as a kid. Just the way I grew up, I was the youngest by a long shot in my family.
Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of older sisters, and I didn't have brothers. I didn't have a lot of contemporaries to play with as a young kid who started watching this at like 3-4 years old. The most interesting character, who's at times a loathsome character, is Danny Pennington. Danny Pennington is the son of Charles Pennington, who's the boss and runs Channel 3 News.
Yeah.
But he's April O'Neil's boss.
And he loves Sid Vicious.
He loves Sid Vicious. So we get Danny right at the precipice of hitting the crossroads in his teenage to adulthood sort of life. And what we can gather through drips and drabs of the plot is that Charles is a single parent. At one point he says, "I make more than enough money for the both of us."
Yeah.
And does not at any point mention or show a wife. That plays a little bit into Danny being the wayward teen. He's got a father who has a really high-powered position and is probably not present often. And that misinterpretation of not being present is seen as not caring. And we hear him say that literally in his conversations with Splinter once he's been captured.
My dad could care less about me.
I doubt that is true.
Why?
All fathers care for their sons.
Danny's character arc is almost realizing that he does in fact have a positive father figure.
Yeah.
Which he does by the end of the movie come to terms with. Most of the film he's kind of saying, why don't I have anything that's helpful here? Why don't I have somebody who's going to be supportive of me? Why doesn't my dad love me? Sorts of questions. But by the end of the film he comes to the realization that love can be shown in a lot of different ways.
And we see him grasping at fatherhood or family or brotherhood. He's not quite a Foot Clan member. He's only just now entering into this. He gets arrested early on in the movie for the first time.
Yeah.
We know that. And in the scene in which we first meet Shredder, he speaks up to help his new family by giving whatever information he knows about the location and whereabouts of the Turtles and Splinter, and becomes this fake honorary member of the family where he gets the Dragondochi but never actually has any fighting training whatsoever. At a certain point, he just vanishes from both families, now feeling completely lost. And we see Danny kind of navigate that cloudy area a couple times in flip-flop and trying to decide on his own until we see him at the very end of the movie reintroduce himself to his father as Dan and not Danny anymore.
He's becoming adult.
So what we see there is Danny struggling between Shredder as the father figure and Charles as his father figure.
Will you introduce Casey Jones?
Casey Jones is my favorite character in the Ninja Turtles universe, and I'm not like really well versed in the Ninja Turtles universe, but the idea that you've now mixed a sports fan into fighting people.
Your instructor's Casey Jones.
Look, I don't want to fight you.
Well, tough rocks, pal.
A Jose Canseco bat? Tell me, you didn't pay money for this.
Fighting crime and saving people. Now you've got something else. And of course, the hockey mask, right?
Dude, not only that, but just him fucking wielding that hockey stick around. I love that first shot where you get him with a hockey stick and he swipes, and I mean, that's like, you're out. You are out. That was like not a playful, I'm just stopping this from happening kind of swipe.
So we meet Casey Jones, who's played by Elias Koteas, who's probably he's not the highest build, but he's, I think, the second highest build in this movie. And he has a plethora of different sports-related weapons throughout this movie. But we see him on his own trying to deal with the crime wave and running into Raphael. And that's how he sort of gets mixed into this whole thing, is he keeps finding Raphael on his own. Yeah. At one point after the movie, stopping two teenage thieves from robbing an old woman of her purse. And then later on, when he's blowing off steam after an argument with Leo, all the way across the cityscape on top of another building just practicing karate moves. Casey Jones is awesome because he has the wit that Raphael has. He gets along with all of the turtles, and he also, of course, gets the babe, April O'Neil, at the end of the movie.
He sure does.
He also uses a cricket bat at one point.
Cricket?
Cricket? Nobody understands cricket. You gotta know what a crumpet is to understand cricket. I'll teach you.
Uses golf clubs at another. Also, the only murderer in this movie, I think, officially. Also, Shredder's not confirmed dead as we have sequels, but at least as far as we know at the end of this movie, he's murdered somebody.
One of the things that I really like about the fight scenes throughout this film is that they really build upon each other. So we kind of have one little small fight scene over here. I'm saying small, but they're really not small. Each one of the fight scenes is fucking amazing. But what ends up happening by the end of the film is that everybody who has been kind of fighting on their own begins fighting together. So we have this epic battle, which really brings the entire film together. And that is a challenge to do because you are so excited during every single one of these scenes. Every single one of these scenes is so beautiful. You're like, what can top this? And it tops itself.
It also lends to more creative choreography because we have different settings for fights as they're bigger or smaller. At one point on a subway platform, another point in an entire multi-floor antique store / apartment. And then at the very end of the movie, the biggest fight is taking place in multiple locations at once. We have some people fighting at the warehouse that's technically Shredder's hideout, and then another one that's just throughout the city as the entire Foot Clan is looking for the Ninja Turtles in the sewers, on the streets, and on the top of an abandoned building.
Match you for it?
1, 2, 3.
Damn great.
But then, you know, like you said, we have other little smaller fights on individuals here and there having fights, like Raph and Casey Jones with a pair of thugs.
Would you say that Casey Jones is a good character or a bad character?
Casey Jones toes the line of anti-hero to hero. You can say that all of these characters are anti-heroes. Anytime you put justice into your own hands, you are, in my opinion at least, by definition, anti-hero. I think that's like Alan Moore's sort of philosophy as well through V for Vendetta. In the context of this movie, if you're going to suspend that level of disbelief as the police are clearly not doing anything, I would say that Casey Jones is a hero. He started on his own with the same intent as the Ninja Turtles. There's a good matching of mood in this movie. It ties together the cinematography, the lighting, transitions,
set design,
and the music. The music floats between being goofy at times, as this movie is somewhat of a comedy.
It's a comedy. It's totally a comedy.
But really moody, really pensive at times.
T-U-R-T-L-T power. T-U-R-T-L-T power.
How do you spell turtle?
L-E fuck.
There was a really brilliant matching of moods between all forms of absorption.
And again, I think that a lot of that comes from being an independent film that none of the major production companies actually wanted to have anything to do with. So everybody who was working on this, it was a passion project. They really, truly wanted to be there. They wanted to make it be awesome. They could not get any distribution for this film. They were trying to go through Paramount, Warner Brothers. There was like at least 10 or 11 studios that all rejected this movie and still had to keep pushing along. And eventually it was released by New Line Cinema. And it was actually the highest grossing independent movie up until Blair Witch Project came up.
Wow, that's a long stretch of
time.
Long
time.
That's like a decade, I think, right?
Right around a decade. I think Blair Witch was 99. Comparatively, the budget for this movie was extremely small compared to other big budget films, and it just killed it.
That probably feeds into the reason why there's no blood at all in this movie, I don't think. There's only one moment where we see people with like slash wounds, kind of, and we don't see anything. We see them kind of holding where like a sharp edge would have gotten them. And that probably had something to do with them struggling to find distribution.
I would suspect that that's why they made decisions about things like the Foot Clan being human.
Right.
This is the budget that we have, and we want to make it be as incredible as it can be. It's a really cool choice to keep the turtles as turtles. You know, you could have very easily taken the characters of being turtles and chosen not to do the suits and chosen to kind of go the other way. And they didn't shy away from that. They were like, we're going to make these suits work. And boy, those suits are outstandingly good, but also goofy at times.
Yeah, of course. But I think that had they had maybe a better budget or something, the blueprint and the foundation was there for an excellent movie. It's goofy at first, and I think you just get used to it pretty quickly. I want to say before you're even out of the sewers, you're already just used to it.
When we were rewatching this just the other day, I was like shocked at how good it has held up. It held up in the same way that I feel like Jurassic Park holds up, where these practical effects truly are still outstanding. Even some of the CGI from some of the other iterations of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, especially the Michael Bay one, like
They
It's
struggle
just
because
garbage.
CGI goes through different fads and trends as to what's popular, and as the technology gets better or worse, we get accustomed to better CGI, and then looking back, it doesn't age well, but practical effects are practical effects.
Yeah.
And it's funny that it holds up in the same way that Jurassic Park does, because there's a staggering difference in budget.
One of the other reasons that it worked so well to have the practical costumes and the actual actors is when you have those CGI effects, that means that your actor, so your April O'Neil, is having to interact with somebody who is wearing a bunch of dots all over themselves, and that's an entirely different experience. And so I think April in this film, what is it, Jennifer Hogue? Judith Hogue, thank you. She nailed it because she's having actual interactions with humans, aka turtles, in order to be able to film those scenes.
There is some level of notoriety in the puppeteering. I believe this is Jim Henson's studio that took over this. I have to imagine that that's got to be in the top 5 for puppeteering at least.
Oh, it's absolutely outstanding. It's absolutely outstanding. One of the only other movies that really did such incredible puppeteering, animatronics, costuming was also Jim Henson, which was Dark Crystal.
Or Pan's Labyrinth too.
Pan's Labyrinth, I would put in an entirely different category.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dark Crystal for sure.
And that is also Jim Henson.
Yeah.
Unsurprising somehow.
And that still comes off as a little bit more goofy than this movie.
It does.
Yeah.
I think that it is extremely clear that both of us love this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I know this is one of your all-time favorites. I had not remembered how good it was. Like, I remembered loving it, but I had no recollection of how absolutely outstanding it was. I had fun the entire way through. There were no lulls. It was exciting and meaningful and impactful, and it had heart from beginning to end.
This comes from a time period where there's not a whole lot of wasted film. It's a fairly short movie. I think it's probably right over 90 minutes. Every scene means something. There's not a whole lot of like reinforcement of ideas. You get the idea through different scenes, but it's not a lot of dry. There's tons of dialogue, and if there's no dialogue, there's action. And each scene moves the plot along. I love this movie, and when people ask, like, what's your top 5 movies, because genres always make things kind of interesting, this one always sneaks in there, and everyone is surprised. I absolutely adore this movie. Watching it with you was a ton of fun, because you are somebody who's a big movie person.
Yeah.
So
it was a blast. I had so much fun. So one of the things that we do on my channel is we rate movies on a scale of 7 thumbs up. So how many thumbs up would you give this movie?
This is a clear 7 for me. It's hard to find things to complain about this movie. If you like superhero movies, if you like Marvel movies, if you like any of this stuff, which are extremely popular right now, and this franchise keeps trying to be rebooted, this to me, the original, it's not because it's original, it's because it's the only one that takes itself seriously. It takes itself seriously from front to back, and therefore I take it seriously, so it winds up really high on my list. If I really wanted to dock it a half thumb for just being slightly dated or slightly goofy, I could, but I won't. I think that this movie is perfect. It's 7 thumbs. Before you rate it, though, I want to know what your expectation of a rating was before watching it.
That's a really good question. I think that my expectation
honestly
was probably that it was going to be around a 5. I thought it was going to be between a 5 and a 7. I remembered loving it, but I thought it was going to be way more childish than it ended up being.
Right.
I really thought that there was just going to be a lot of tell me instead of showing me sorts of stuff that a lot of kids' movies do, where it kind of walks you through things. And this movie did not do that at all. So I would easily say 6 thumbs up. It might even be closer to a 7 for me. This was a near perfect, if I'm going to talk about like the kids movie genre, which is where I found a copy of this DVD, was in the kids movie section.
Crime.
I would say for sure this is in my top 3 of the kids movie genres, and easily 6 or 7 thumbs up.
Yeah, if I had an 8th thumb to give up, I would.
You would.
Yeah, I would probably.
I respect that.
Yeah.
I think you can only have 7 though.
Okay.
One other thing that I did want to talk about, since I just mentioned that I found the DVD, is that we actually found on the DVD a lovely game. So I'm going to insert some clips of how incredibly good this game is. You get to play the game by using your DVD remote controller, and it is relatively simple, and you are probably watching me die immediately on screen right now.
I love that it looks somewhere between the first iteration of Doom and that old Windows screensaver
Oh my
of
God.
you going through
the maze.
Yes.
It's literally the maze. Oh my God, I miss that so much. Why
It's-
doesn't that exist anymore? Does that still exist?
I don't think people care about screensavers anymore.
That's that's a good point. All right, you might be right. Anyways, thank you so much for coming and joining me, for suggesting this movie. Will you tell everybody once more again where they can find you and what they can be excited about coming up for you?
So you can find me actually on this channel 2 other times, even though I've never met Kaylee up until this weekend. I am the Egg Day video guy.
Yeah!
So it was really fun to make food with Kaylee. It was really fun to watch movies with Kaylee and of course review them. So I had a great time. So you can find me on this channel already. You can also find me on my own channel. I have a Football Grump channel that's for college football stuff. I have the Just Giants podcast if you happen to be a New York Giants fan and maybe a pizza fan, on YouTube as well. And I'm on Twitter if you're really into football and movies, I guess. You could follow me on there at football_grump.
And that brings up a good point, which is that maybe I can convince you to come and celebrate Egg Day with me sometime soon.
I could probably make that happen.
Cool.
Yeah.
I would love to cook with you and watch more movies again
That'd be
together.
awesome.
We gotta pick more Egg Day related videos.
That should be easy.
I got some stuff I'm thinking about for the future.
Hell yeah.
Anyways, thank you again so much for being here, and thank you guys for watching, and I can't wait for the next one. T-U-R-T-L-T power. T-U-R-T-L-T power.
How do you spell turtle?
L-E fuck. I'm bad at spelling.